Once again, my name is Fred Nauer. I'm the Assistant Chief Flight Instructor at Thunderbird Aviation. I'd like to welcome everybody to our, what will hopefully now be a monthly safety seminar on various topics throughout the year. This first one will be an introduction to ForeFlight, both from the VFR and the IFR standpoint. There's a lot of information to get through here. That's why I have this one blocked off for a 2-hour period. If you can stay through the whole thing, that's great. If you have to drop off after a while, and I'll understand. I'll have my iPad hooked up into the Zoom system here, so I'll be going right to the iPad and talking about all the information, so you'll be able to see it on your screen too. So if you instead of selecting the selection where you can see everybody on your screen, if you just select the person who's talking, I think you'll be able to see the ForeFlight information full screen. So let me get over here to my ForeFlight. There we go. So I'm broadcasting from the system here. And bring up the ForeFlight system. There it is. I know it'll get bigger there in a second. Hang on a second while I meet some folks who just joined in here. Alrighty, so the ForeFlight system is an electronic flight bag. It has all the for the one low price that you can get after, the app is free, but to get all the bells and whistles that you get that go with it, you have to pay ForeFlight some money. But even for the basic price of $100 a year, you get, let me zoom out here, all the sectionals in the United States and all the IFR load charts in the United States and all the IFR highest charts in the United States for you instrument folks, and also for you instrument folks, all the instrument approach plates for the whole country. Now I'm able to pick up all this stuff right now because I'm hooked up to the Wi-Fi, and if you're hooked up to the Wi-Fi, all this stuff automatically appears. If you, when you get ForeFlight, I'll show you how to download specific sections. If you don't want to try to download, if you don't have enough memory to download all this stuff all at the same time. Hang on just a second while I make sure I got this set up correctly. So I went to the ForeFlight.com site and picked up the pricing that they have. This has not changed since almost the very beginning of ForeFlight. The version I have is the Performance Plus version, so that you may see some of the things that will appear on my iPad that if you're on one of the lower versions, you may not be able to see. But like I said, for the $99 version, you get the flight planning, aviation weather, VFR and IFR charts, all the stuff under the chart supplement book, which used to be called the Airport Facilities Directory. Excuse me. You can do weight and balance, do the logbook, put in a checklist for your airplane. For the $200 version, you get all of that, plus georeference approaches on charts. What that means is the airplane will, the airplane always appears on the main screen of the ForeFlight as you're flying around, as long as you have your ForeFlight hooked up to a GPS system, even by either by Bluetooth or by Wi-Fi. But if you have the $200 version, then you'll also get the little airplane when you're flying, for your instrument guys, when you're flying approaches. And but you can also then, from the instructor standpoint, the next one down, put the plates on the map so you can make sure that your student's not going to fly you into the wrong kind of airspace while you're out there practicing IFR approaches on your own. Synthetic vision is just like it says. It's basically a almost like a PFD from a Garmin, where it gives you the information about, almost like a a six-pack right here on the ForeFlight. Although it takes up a lot of space, so it not that useful as far as I'm concerned. The only reason, the $300 version is basically for those people who are doing charter type operations, because it has lots of bells and whistles for the charter world. I basically got it for the 3D airport view and the icing information that you can get off of it. And because I do these seminars at various times throughout the year for various situations, I decided to do the full-on version just to be able to show everything that you got. So again, even if you have just the $99 version, that you'll be able to do most of the stuff that I'm talking about today. The $200 version just adds a couple things to it. But like I said, if you see something on my screen that doesn't appear on yours, if you're trying to play with your ForeFlight at the same time as I am, then you may not see the exact same things because I have the higher version of the ForeFlight for sale. Some of the other stuff you might want to download onto your ForeFlight, because you have the various ways of doing that. You go down to the bottom level there, there's a section called Documents. Just tap on the word Documents there. And over on the left side, you have the FAA documents. All the stuff that FAA publishes, either as a handbook or all the forms that they use, or a lot of the advisory circulars are available from right on ForeFlight. You just have to scroll down and pick the thing that you want, and then once you download the thing, it will appear in your documents. I just call that file My Documents, and at the top I have the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, because that's what I use for as part of my being the Assistant Chief Flight Instructor at Thunderbird Aviation. But you can get all the regulations, the Aeronautical Information Manual. And all these things are, as they update, it automatically updates them on ForeFlight at least once a month. The other thing that I would suggest that you download is the Pilot's Guide to ForeFlight Mobile. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here, since I may go over fairly quickly, just make a note to yourself of what you want, of the subject area that you wanted to see, and then just be able to look in this book later to be able to pull up what's going on. All the information I'm talking about and all the stuff that you can do with ForeFlight is talked about in here. Like I said, I've downloaded all the handbooks. I've downloaded the North Central version of the chart supplement book that used to be called the Airport Facilities Directory. You can get all this information on ForeFlight already, but there's some of the stuff that when you pull up the AFD thing, the chart supplement subject for a particular airport, if you see a symbol on the airport diagram or an abbreviation in the description of the airport that you don't understand, this is the only way to go to get, the only place to go to get the very front pages of the book that has all the explanation of what all that stuff is in the airport diagram, in the individual entries for the airports inside the airport facilities directory. I've also downloaded the VFR chart legend, the IFR chart legend, and the digital terminal procedure supplemental, which is a big, huge term for the front pages and the back pages of the approach plate book. When you used to buy a book, the stuff in the front was all the legends, and in the back it talked about descent rates and climb rates. Those pages have been separated out by ForeFlight and put in as a separate thing. And the VFR chart legend and the IFR chart legend is just handy stuff to have, especially for me as an instructor. So back to maps. So as I zoom back out here to our home plate, if you end up on somewhere else on the chart, as I just randomly move away here, you want to get back to where you are, as long as you're hooked up to Wi-Fi or near a GPS system, just tap this little rectangle in the upper right-hand corner, and it centers the chart exactly where you are. So to discuss the things on ForeFlight, let's start with the thing that I already opened up once in the upper left-hand corner. If you tap on that rectangle, here's all the stuff that can be displayed on the screen. Again, some of the stuff that you may see here, you may not be able to see on your ForeFlight, depending on what level that you have as far as buying the stuff is concerned. But if you start at the very top on the left-hand column, it's the aeronautical information. The reason ForeFlight did this is because if you're looking at the sectional and you're flying and you have the track up version where the direction you're traveling is always at the top of the page, then the map will be upside down. So what ForeFlight did was take all the most important information and put it in the ForeFlight so that no matter what the orientation of the chart is, no matter which way you're tracking across the ground, the information for this stuff will always be straight up and down and easy to read. And then what also appears over here is all these little toggle switches over on the left side for all the information that you can put on the chart over and above what you already see. Or you can also use this without the sectional so that all this aeronautical information is there, even if you're not looking exactly at the sectional or at or one of the instrument high or low charts. So the very top square is all the nav aids. I'm sorry, all the airports. So private airports, public airports, they're all listed here, and they're all color coded just like they're in the sectional. So the blue ones have control towers, the magenta ones are uncontrolled. The next square down is all the airspaces. Class B airspace, Class D airspace. All that information will be there, including all the other 30 nautical mile mode CVAL. Next one down is intersections. Let's take them all one at a time here. So intersections that are on the low wind route chart. All the nav aids, including all the for those that are being able to be used by the National Airspace System, the little compass rows around them. This is, they've just separated these two. So now it used to be that there was only the airway marker that would give the airways for the Victor Airways along a particular route. And the nav aids would always show up at the same time. Now they separated the two of them so you can only pull up, you can pull up if you want to, only one at a time. The next square down is, and you're going to move fairly far out of field to see this, is the boundary for the center. Minneapolis Center takes up all of most of North and South Dakota, a little bit of Nebraska, Iowa, the little bit of chunk of Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula. All this stuff belongs to the to Minneapolis Center, and so you have they put the boundary on there, and then in the various sectors, you'll have the frequencies for that particular sector. So if you haven't been handed off to somebody, or you need to talk to somebody, you can pull up those, get those frequencies available to you. So let me go over here to the mountains and do this one again. So the very bottom square is major highways. Well, this one's supposed to be terrain, but I'm not seeing any changes to it. And the bottom one is major highways. I'm not seeing any, although on that one I think you need to be in fairly close. So you can pull up as much of this information as you want, or as little of this information as you want. Or most of the time for me, I just, because I've been reading sectional since way back last century, I usually just leave most of this stuff off. I just don't bring the aeronautical stuff on at all. The next thing down in this column is the street map. Let me get the VFR section on. The street map is there all the time, and it's basically like a Google map type of thing, so you can tell where you are just based on the roads nearby. And the closer you get, the more detail you can get on the type of roads and everything that you're looking at there. The next one is the aerial map. You can either only get one at a time. The aerial map is only available if you're hooked up to Wi-Fi. So this is a nice one to use if you're out there playing and you're practicing turns around a point or S-turns across the road. Then you can use the breadcrumb thing we'll talk about here in just a second, and see how well you did it, and actually zoom in on exactly on the road that you did your turn around to point at to see how well it went. Like I said before, we got all the VFR sectionals for the whole country in here. And the IFR low chart and the IFR high chart. And for the people who are in other parts of the country that have those areas that have that, the VFR flyway charts through very, very busy Class B airspace. Ours is not busy enough, and it has enough space underneath it that they have not felt the need to create flyways around our Class B airport at Minneapolis International Airport. So that's the first column. Let me go back to aerial map here. The second column is all sorts of stuff that you can put on over the top. The first one is radar composite. If you have the ability to pull weather in through the ADS-B system in your airplane, either through ADS-B in, we use in most of our aircraft at Thunderbird, we have a Stratus transponder. The Stratus company also works with ForeFlight, so it sends information through Wi-Fi to the ForeFlight for all the weather information that you can get from the ADS-B in system. ForeFlight is now just recently in the last 6 months or so added systems so that if you have Garmin systems on board your airplane, that have ADS-B systems in it. You may be able to pull in with the ADS-B system through a Bluetooth system. What I found is what you need to do is go to the place that's usually on the transponder. Go to the transponder and hit the function button. And if there's a Bluetooth system in the under the function button on the Garmin transponder, then you probably will be able to get the ADS-B information to your iPad. Just go to the regular iPad settings, go to Bluetooth, and when the number of the transponder shows up on your screen, tap on that, and the information will be able to show up. All this information we're about to look at here will show up while you're flying, in addition to being able to see it while you're on the ground. So the radar composite means that it's all the radar returns at all levels of the atmosphere. So that, since it's not doing much here in the north part of the country here, so, blue, just like, it's just like every other radar display you've ever seen. The blue is snow, the green is rain, and the pink is a mixture of snow and rain. Probably a little ice in there too. So the composite gives you all levels of the atmosphere. You take off the composite one and then type in just radar lowest tilt. It's the lowest level of precipitation that the radar is picking up. So for us, it's probably, you probably need, when you're on the ground hooked up to Wi-Fi, you can look at both to see where the weather is going to be at its worst, especially after you're going to fly. But when you're flying, the only one you get out of the ADS-B system is the radar composite. So all the radar returns at all levels. So you notice that right now there's a hole there in the middle of this storm. If I go back to composite, it kind of gets filled in a little bit as you look at all the precipitation at all levels of the atmosphere. So I use those two a lot. The next one, you can only pull them up one at a time, is enhanced satellite. Satellite stuff's never really done much for me. IR satellite. I suppose if you're a weather guy and you can geek out about what all these colors mean, that's good stuff for you. This icing stuff, again, if you don't have the level that I have, you might not be able to see this, but this is where the areas of icing are. And next one's just global. Areas of turbulence. Different colors are for different percentages of how much turbulence is going to be there. Clouds is just another, basically a satellite view. Surface analysis. Make sure my fingers are warmed up enough. Displays all the information on the chart, just like the surface analysis chart that that you remember back when you were learning how to be a private pilot and had to learn about all this stuff back in the black and white days. So areas of equal pressure, the isobars, cold fronts, warm fronts, stationary fronts, highs and lows, all that information is displayed right there on your screen. The only problem is that the letters never get any bigger, so you can't zoom in to see exactly where it's at, except for the cold fronts. But the highs and lows, the L and the H doesn't get any bigger as you zoom in. So winds. So this is another way of being able to tell how the winds are doing. Over on the side here, for all the stuff that I kind of skip by it, there's a little square that you can, on the right side, that you can grab a hold of and move up and down to get the winds at the level that you're flying to see exactly what the winds are going to be doing where you are. 2.5, so 2,500 feet, all the way up to 63,000 feet. And the color you can see gently behind all the wind marks is color coded down here in the bottom for what the temperature is outside. Let's bring this back down to someplace where we're used to seeing it. So the wind speeds now, the color coding on the screen tells you how fast the wind is blowing. The oranger, the more orange, the faster it's going. The hazard advisor, you'll notice down here in the lower right-hand corner, doesn't work because that will only appear if you're flying the airplane, or put it in your car, I guess. If you're moving greater than 30 knots, then you'll be able to see the hazards, but basically it shows you where all the towers are, where all the obstacles are. And it'll color code them if you're too close. So when I'm flying, I'll use, if I know that rain or stuff is going to be in the area, I'll probably use the radar composite. All the rest of the stuff is just gravy. The other thing that I use all the time when I'm flying is the traffic button. Let me get rid of the hazards there. This is coming from Wi-Fi right now. I'm sorry, yeah, through the Wi-Fi. And you can also pull in this traffic from ADS-B. And if you zoom in close, it brings up even more traffic. Most of this stuff is, if you're within 40 nautical miles of a major airport like Minneapolis, they'll pull this information through the TIS system. So it's the radar returns and the transponder returns of all the aircraft in there. Outside of that 40 nautical mile area, you're probably only going to be able to pull up people who have ADS-B on board their airplane. When you're flying, the actual tail number of the airplane and the comparative altitude of where you are will be listed right next to the airplane. The closer you get to these aircraft, the color coding changes. If you get within 1,000 feet or a mile, it turns yellow. If you get within 500 feet or within a half a mile, it turns red. So you can really bring your eyes to the traffic, and then you can look at the sectional chart and figure out where they are in relationship to your airplane, and try to look outside and compare surface features to figure out where the other airplane is. But again, it only, outside the 40 nautical mile ring, it'll only work if the other aircraft has the ADS-B out system in it. So since they're only required to have ADS-B out in the same place that the transponder with mode C is required, so within 30 nautical miles of a Class B airport, in and above Class C airspace and anywhere above 10,000 feet, then a lot of people who only fly in northern Minnesota did not put ADS-B out in their system. So you still got to look out the window to find the other traffic. You can't just rely totally on the display here from ForeFlight. For you CAP people out here, they have a whole CAP section for helping you with all the stuff that you have to do there. So the grid and the cell grid and the GARS grid, whatever you're using for your search and rescue, that information is available to you. As a pre-flight situation, they have all the airmets and sigmets. You can select each individual one on the bottom, or you can pull them up one at a time. So they got convective sigmets. The yellow is the outlook. The red is the stuff that's going on right now. IFR sigmets, both for mountain obscuration and regular IFR flying. The low turbulence, which is one most of us will most likely need to worry about. Oof. Hey, winner. So, some reason my turbulence high isn't coming on, or my icing. What the heck is going on here? There it is. So areas of icing, you just tap on the particular dot area, and it'll bring up the basic information about what type of icing it is, where it's at, and so down here where all those storms were, we have an active icing area from the surface up to 19,000 feet. It is getting moderate icing. Close that. Okay, my turbulence high isn't coming up. But anyway, all this information that you can get, just tap on the area and the information for that that particular SIGMET or AirMet will appear on your screen for you. Next one is TFRs, the ones that are always there, like the Romulan neutral zone that's around Washington, D.C., and the other permanent ones like down here around Disney World. But any TFRs that are active at this point will be on the screen in red. This one up here is near Grand Forks. This is the area where they fly the drones, because this in Grand Forks is where they teach all the Air Force drone pilots. So they fly them out here to teach them, to how to fly the things by remote control. There's another one that's usually here in northern Minnesota near Hibbing. That's usually yellow most of the time, and it turns red when they're about to blast more taconite out of the, or more iron ore out of the hole to turn it into taconite to send it to the steel mills. Well, the other nice thing that they do here, and well, this one's probably, there's a TFR for the Super Bowl. But the other nice thing that ForeFlight does that that the FAA site doesn't do is they've gone into all the stadiums that have more than 30,000 seats in it and input the schedule of the sports, the sport that is happening there, like the Twins Stadium and the Viking Stadium and the Gopher Stadium in north of Minneapolis. And if there's a game about to start, they'll put a yellow ring around that to remind you that up to 3,000 feet, 3 miles away from that, while the hour before the game to an hour after the game, there's an active TFR over that spot. The FAA doesn't put that in any of their publications. They just they feel that we told you what the rule is. It's up to you as a pilot to figure out if that stuff's going on or not. So we, so now ForeFlight is able to help us out by when a game is about to start, they'll put the circle on there, and they'll probably leave it there, a few hours after the game's supposed to stop, just in case it goes into extra innings or overtime or something like that. So that's the TFR section. The other one I use a lot, especially when the weather's going to be bad, are these flight category dots. There's a dot for every place there's a weather observation system, whether it's human beings inputting information into the National Weather Service or an automated system putting information into the National Weather Service. The information will show up here. If you remember the old area forecast, the last part of the forecast was always in Outlook. And the Outlook would always say VFR, or it would say MVFR, or it would say IFR, or it would say LIFR. And so ForeFlight took the definitions of those four terms and put it into the color coding that they use on their screens here. I think Garmin has a similar thing with slightly different colors, but the National Weather Service has taken these same colors and started to use those too. So green is VFR, but it's weatherman's VFR. It's greater than a 3,000 foot ceiling and greater than 5 miles visibility. The blue dot is marginal VFR, 1,000 foot to 3,000 foot ceilings and or 1 mile to 5 mile visibility. The red dots are the magenta dots are IFR, which means ceilings from 500 to 1,000 and visibility from 1 mile to 3 miles. I think I messed up on the marginal VFR. It's 3 miles to 5 miles. So then IFR is 1 to 5 miles. So then the red dot is low IFR. I've got those back. Red dot is IFR. The magenta dot is low IFR, where its visibility is less than a mile, ceiling's less than 500 feet. So unless you're a really experienced IFR pilot, or they have the correct kind of, and if they have the correct kind of instrument approaches to that airport, you can land at some place with a pink dot. But if you're a VFR pilot, most of the time you want to stay where the stuff's all green and maybe where it's turning blue, but it just depends on your personal minimums. The more you zoom in, the more where those airports are will increase. The surface wind down here is just like the old weather chart. It has the little flags on it. You're looking real close there. If there's circles, that means the wind is calm. If it's V, that means the wind is variable. And you got the flags here, and so a full flag, like down there just above the 158 track on the bottom, that's 10 knots. The one that's just northeast of that has a flag at half mast. That means it's 5 knots. So it's kind of like Roman numerals. Every flag is 10 knots. If it goes to 50 knots, it'll change to a pennant, but probably not here. And if it's got an orange tinge to it, that means the weather is gusting. Winds aloft. Again, are the flags here. And you can pick the altitude that you're flying at in order to be able to figure out what the winds aloft are. The higher you go, the more flags appear. Temperature dew point spread, where it's dangerous, changes to orange. Give you an idea where the temperature dew point spread is to the point where clouds or fog may form. Temperatures at the surface. Visibility at the surface, again using the same color coding as I talked about before. Ceilings in feet. And like the old weather chart, the sky coverage is using the dots. Open dot with nothing in it is clear. The one with a one pie slice in it is scattered. One with one pie slice, mostly filled in is broken, and all filled in is overcast. If anybody has put out any pie reps, then they are listed here. You can tap on the pie rep itself to get the information about it. So this is moderate turbulence. Here we got a guy for icing at 10,500 feet. So they put the altitude that the pie rep is being called at. Mountain wave there in northern Texas. If it's just sky cover or something to do with clouds, then it'll be the little eye shape thing. This next one, we might not get much on it. Lightning here at this time of year. There, down that thunderstorm down there in the Gulf of Mexico. Shows you where the lightning is. Now, all this stuff that we're getting, the weather information and the radar information, you want to be very careful about using this for an exact flight planning type situation, because by the time the radar makes the full sweep from low to high, and then takes that information, puts it in the computer, then the computer sends it to the National Weather Service, and then the National Weather Service disseminates it to all the people who want information about the radar. By the time you get it on your ForeFlight, it may be 15 to 20 minutes old. So especially in the summertime when thunderstorms are happening, the weather may have changed a whole lot since the time that that radar picture was taken, or these lightning bolts were taken, same thing. So always take information like this with a grain of salt to make sure that don't use it as, oh, there's a hole, let me go there. Just use it as a, oh, there's the storm, let me stay away from it kind of situation. And all the obstacles that would be on the sectional chart with the same information on it. If it's a small little tent, it's below 1,000 feet. If it looks like a Eiffel Tower, it's more than 1,000 feet. And if it looks like a fan, it's a wind farm for windmills. If you create any waypoints on your own, then those waypoints will be displayed when you choose on ForeFlight. I'll show you how to do those in a bit. And if you're looking for fuel prices, way down here at the bottom, it'll tell you the fuel prices in various areas, and I think there's some sort of threshold about whether it turns orange or red. But the cheapest fuel is usually in green. But that also means probably you have to pump it yourself. And finally, Jet A prices. So all sorts of information over here on the left side for these two columns that you can pull up for the information here. Let me pull up the VFR sectional again, because the next thing over on the top is the flight plan section. So in the flight plan section over on the left side, there's information about an airplane, and all the airplanes that you've already input into your system will be under the tail number at the top. Just tap that and you can change it to whatever tail number you want. To start an airplane, you can either go here and hit the plus, or there's another, you can do the same thing down here and more. But if you hit the plus system, then it says you want to start over with a brand new airplane. So the tail number at the top there has to start with the letter N. You just put in the numbers and letters at the end of it, it'll search the entire worldwide database and make them up with something that's not your airplane. But if you start with the N number, let's see here. So you type in the serial number. Let me go down to more here. The more at the very bottom row, there's more, and there's aircraft. We should try something different here. So it knows it's an airplane, but then you have to go in here to put in the type of airplane that it is. So you can search through all the PA-28s and then if 161, then you get all the PA 161s on the list here, and you can choose the one that it is. Then it searches all the PA 28-161s, look for the tail number, and in the level that I'm at, will pull up the information for the airplane that you have. You can change the color and the airspeed, performance profiles. Like I said, since it knows the airplane, it'll come up with profiles that you can use for different types of mixtures, for different speeds. Best glide speed, best glide ratio. This is used for a system on the chart when you're flying, that if you have the glide distance selected, it will draw a ring around your airplane that will constantly change shape depending on the terrain underneath you and the ground speed that you're flying, to say, if the engine quit right now, how far away could you glide? So if you don't have the higher version like I do, and you need to put in this information on your own, just go to the POH and look in the section, and usually somewhere in the emergency section, it talks about the glide distance of the airplane. And if you figure out how far it will glide in, because the first thing you have to do is make sure that you're 1-to-1. So most of the time, the stuff across the bottom of the chart is in miles, and the stuff across the side is in feet. So you got to make sure that you're when you do the division, that they're both the same units. So if change the miles to feet, do the division, the altitude over the distance, and that'll give you your glide ratio. So in this case, the best glide ratio of this airplane will be 11. And the best glide speed is right out of your POH. And then it'll give you, based on going to that speed, where the glide area that you will see on the chart. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because it only happens when you're moving. So then for the information here for the basic empty weight, you can use that for the weight and balance stuff that we're going in here in just a little while. The fuel types, again, if it's not already here, then just type that in. Down the bottom here is FAA equipment. The FAA is now moved totally to using the ICAO flight plan. So what you want to do is go and use the ICAO information for the equipment and surveillance equipment and weight category and that type of thing. So if we can disappear from this for just a second and go to share screen and go to that screen and share that one. So what you're seeing now is I went through all the stuff the FAA has. There's about 3 pages of this stuff. These are the things that are most likely going to be used by general aviation airplanes. So ICAO equipment, the letter S in the equipment section means that you have a standard ComNav system and you have at least a VOR and an ILS. So that even though you have VOR and ILS abbreviations later in that same list, if you put the S in there for your basic equipment, the VOR and ILS is assumed. If you have DME, you got to put the letter D. If you have a WAS type system, you have to put in the LPV section in there, letter B. If you have regular GPS without WAS, the letter G. The surveillance equipment is, what do you have on board your airplane that the ATC can use? The letter C is for a transponder with mode C, which is most of what everybody has nowadays. And letter A would be just a transponder with mode A only. The B and the B1 and B2 are for ADS-B with the 1090 megahertz capability, and whether you have out or out and in capabilities inside your airplane. U1 and U2 are for the UAT version. So just, if you have ADS-B in your airplane, just look at the information that came with the ADS-B to figure out which frequency section it's using to determine which letter that you have to do. Another thing you have to put in is weight category. Most of the airplanes we fly will be L for light. The ICAO PBN that we saw on the other screen stands for performance-based navigation. Just look at your GPS manual to see what level you're at. But most of the most common ones are C2 for RNAV systems with a GNSS and S1 for our systems with WAS available on it. So back to ForeFlight. So we put all that information here under equipment for the equipment there, and then same thing for the surveillance equipment. Weight category, it knows already is an L. PBN, depending on what kind of GPS system you have on board. But for all the different kinds of airplanes, they have even stuff for life rafts and emergency equipment. Then you can add all this stuff together, and then this airplane becomes the aircraft that you can use when you set up for ForeFlight. So when you're setting up a flight plan on ForeFlight. So if you have as many different airplanes as if you fly a bunch of different airplanes, you can go through and put them all in. So then when you get back to the map section, in the ForeFlight section, all that information is there. If you want to use any of the airplanes you've pre-printed in there, I forgot to save it, so it didn't appear in my box here. Just tap on it, and that will go up there. And the mixture that you normally use, that you chose to be the standard one, and what altitude you usually like to fly at, will all be set over there. If not, you can put all that information in on your own. So, I've been going at it for about an hour here, so let's take a quick little break, and we'll come back and we'll go into this flight planning stuff. And I'll answer these chat questions when I get back. Okay, so there's one question on the chat board about icing levels. Any of those, I was just playing with that. Anything like icing or any information that has different levels connected to it, when you tap on it, the bar will appear over here on the right side with the different altitudes. You just slide that bar up. It may take a minute for the information to appear, but then the information will be there for that particular altitude. So there's the one for turbulence, and it'll pick up the same one for the same altitude for icing. So you can take a look at all the stuff for the same levels that you would be flying at. And I was looking at this one for clouds. It looks like if you go down low, it gives you the idea what the level of the clouds are, so it can give you an idea of where the ceilings might be. Again, use all the the METAR information, all that type of stuff, get the exact weather information, but this will help you out. So any of the stuff over there in that column on the right side has the little bar here on the side, will allow you to choose whatever altitude you want to look at. Okay, so back to flight planning. So if you click the flight plan thing, the area here in the middle is where you want to put in the information about where you want to go. If you're a VFR pilot and you just fly a straight line between point A and point B all the time, then just type in the place that you're coming from, type in the place that you're going to, and you're done. Now, based on the information of the airplane that you put over here on the side, it'll measure the distance of the line and tell you on the bottom how long it is. And based on the altitude you've chosen and the speed for the speed usually for that mixture at the altitude you've chosen, it'll tell you how long it's going to take you to get there based on the winds right now. In this case, it's 26 knots of headwind at the altitude that you planned on flying. So the ETA won't appear until you start moving, but based on the fuel flow that you've chosen, it should take you 21.8 gallons to get there for the airplane that I've chosen. If you have the 3D version, then you can go and look at the airports. In this case, that line there is the direction you're heading. And then you can look at the airport from various altitudes to figure out what it's going to look like when you get there. So from the direction you're coming from, what's the airport going to look like? And anywhere along the route. Again, but this is you got to have the most expensive one to get this stuff. But the next one is most important. If you don't have ADS-B in available to you in your airplane, and you want to have information like charts and weather information, airmets and sigmets, and all the stuff that we've been looking at, and fuel price information, then it will take an area that is 50 nautical miles around your route of flight and pull in all the information from all the places in all those spots. And if you can either download each individual piece of information individually for the weather, airmet sigmets, and Tfrs, and then the fuel prices, and then the NOTAMs, or you can just do the whole thing by packing at the bottom. What this does is put this information directly into your memory banks on your iPad so they can access this stuff while you're flying. So if you don't have access to the ADS-B in through your ADS-B system, then you can use this to get information. When I first got ForeFlight, if I was flying low enough, my iPad's connected up to the Verizon system. If it could find a cell tower, it would connect up to that and give me the same information. But that stuff was, sometimes depending, and if I got much above about 4,000 feet AGL, that thing kind of disappeared. So it's always better if you don't have that information, those systems available to you, pack your stuff. It stays in your memory bank for about 3 days, and then it forgets it. So now all this stuff is there. So anytime we're flying, all those pieces of information will be available to us, even if we get to when we get away from where the Wi-Fi is. So that was the little suitcase. If you haven't packed yet, the little red exclamation point will be next to it. If there's an exclamation point next to your airport, it usually means that there's NOTAMs at that airport. The star is if you want to use this, especially for the instrument guys, which we'll go to next, if you're going to fly this route a lot, you can tap the little star, then it'll turn gold and it'll put it in your favorites, which is the next is one of the another selections up here at the top, so that you don't have to type it in all the time. You can just find it in your favorites and use that information available to you. So the edit version of where we're in now, we can use that to edit any information inside the rectangle here. Above that, we got the word clear, so that if we're done with this, we can keep clear all and get rid of this one. Or we've got to Fargo and we want to fly the same line home, we just flip the little forward and back arrows and it swaps the route around. The nav log selection on the bottom then gives you the information as if it was a nav log, but since we only got 2 points on there, it really doesn't give us that much information. We'll look more about that when we do that. The profile version, again, will give you the airspace and in my case, the icing information and the area that you're flying based on the altitude that you've flown. If you pick a lower altitude, it may start, some of these obstacles start changing color because you may be getting close to them. If you get too low, the obstacles turn red. And in areas where we may be running into danger. So that was the profile view. When you're back in the edit mode, you have 3 selections over on the side. The procedure one is basically for the IFR guys. We'll talk about that in a second. The routes for VFR, that's disregarded. The procedure one is what we want to look at here because it also has approaches and that type of stuff. But for the VFR people, it has traffic patterns. So since you said you were going to Fargo, it says, okay, here's all the runways at Fargo. Here's the NOTAMs telling you that runway 13 and 31 is closed. So it gives you that information here too. But it also tells you based on the weather report right now this very second, the best wind is 1907, meaning it'd probably be best to land on runway 18. So then if you choose to do 18, you click the little arrow next to that, it gives you all sorts of choices. How do you want to enter the traffic pattern? Now, obviously Fargo's a towered airport and this would not be something you would probably use there, but if it was an uncontrolled airport, you could use this to say, okay, now from the direction I'm going, it says the best side here is come into left traffic on the 45 to downwind and enter the traffic pattern that way. And what it has done, if you add it to the route, is put that information up here in the flight plan, changed your route of flight just slightly. So instead of going to the middle of the airport, now you're a couple of degrees over so that you're going to enter the 45 to the left downwind for runway 18. And it'll even draw the picture for you on your map so you can follow it right along. You can also go to the other side, come back and do a teardrop entry. It'll draw that one for you. Midfield direct, but again, since we're on the wrong side, we'd have to go over to the other side and come back. But this is saying, there's a new advisory circular out. It's been out for about 2 years. It says you can fly right over the middle of an uncontrolled airport as long as there's nobody else in the traffic pattern. and turn yourself right on the downwind. You don't have to do a teardrop entry. But the big caveat there is there's nobody else in the traffic pattern, so you got to make sure of that. And it'll do the same thing for right traffic, which is more likely from the direction we're coming, the better way to do the teardrop entry. Again, Fargo's a towered airport. You wouldn't be doing this specifically for Fargo, but it is an option that you have available to you on the VFR side of things. So for the filing purposes, the ETD, then you can tell them what time you plan on leaving. So then it'll adjust the information on the bottom based on the winds and stuff at that forecast for that time. And since you told them what time you're leaving, now it gives you an ETA of when you're going to get there. Now, what can you do with all this information? The next button over before the edit is the little send button, which is the universal symbol for send something somewhere. And you can mail this flight to somebody else. The flight section, what we're going to talk about here, the plates the business you could do, we got a logbook stuff you could send it to, we got send it to a clipboard so that you could save it for later, share it as an FPL file, which is something you can use with Google Earth and be able to look at your route based on looking at Google Earth if you have that. You can print it, or if you have other people in the airplane with an iPad, you can use your Bluetooth to send this information to their iPad. So even though they don't have ForeFlight, they'll be able to follow along with the flight as you're going. So the one we want to do now is flights, because if you select that, then it says here's the information about when we're going to go, and because of all the information you've already put in about the airplane, and when you signed into ForeFlight, you put your name and all the pertinent information of you as a pilot into the system. This thing's already basically ready to go. We talked about the nav log already. The briefing button, if you tap that, sends the information to 1-800-weather brief, just like if you did it on your computer or called the number on your phone and talked to a briefer. And then it gives you a standard weather briefing. So now, for the airplane that I had there under my name, we now have an official weather briefing for a trip from Crystal to Fargo. And all the information that you would normally get from the briefer is right here. You just tap the little arrow on the bottom and it just moves right through. But you don't even have to look at this stuff. Because you hit the briefing button, your name and airplane have already automatically been put into the system. And if there was any question about whether you got a weather briefing or not, that information, your name and tail number is already there. And it says, yes, you did get a weather briefing before you left the ground. And all the information you normally get in a weather briefing is all there. Now, because I asked for 2,000 feet, it brought me way down there, but this would be, would give you the standard information here from the winds aloft forecast plus the altitude you asked for. And if it's, halfway, it's not one of the altitudes that are depicted here, it will move the information around and interpolate the winds at the altitude you chose. So that's the weather briefing part. Then the next button over is, down here at the bottom, proceed to file. It gives you one last chance to check all the information to make sure you have everything that you want on there. Then you tap the file button at the bottom of this image that shows up here, and it will actually go into the 1-800 weather brief system and go into the filing system and be ready to go. Once you've done that, you'll get an email on your phone because you already told ForeFlight what your email is. You'll get an email on your phone saying that the flight plan has been accepted. So if you don't get an email, you know that the system didn't pick it up right away. But especially for your IFR folks, that's an excellent thing because what it also tell you is what route you're going to get. So if you ask for one route and they're going to give you another one, that route will be listed on the email so that you won't waste time plugging the information for the route you're not going to get into your navigation system, you can put the ForeFlight, you can put in the one that they're actually going to clear you for. So that's the send button. So now back to, if you don't like what you got, you just grab the thing and move it off. And let's go back to going direct to those two places. Let's go back to an altitude that'll work. Now we'll talk about the IFR, folks. So if you select IFR, once you get above 3,000 feet AGL, then it only gives you the evens plus the evens altitudes, or in the VFR case, the evens plus 500 are coming back the other way to give you the odds. So let's do this at 4,000 feet. So now in the procedure section, you can also figure out what approach you might want to fly into Fargo for the best wind. Let's say, okay, I want to get there and I want to do the ILS from Fargo and add that to the route, and to put all that information in there. And if you have the capability in the $200 version of having the approach plate appear on your chart, the approach plate will appear. We close the flight plan for a second so we can see this whole thing. It's kind of dim right now because when you tap the side here, get all this information over here about the one that you have right now. And if you wanted to change it along the route, you could do that. Down here at the bottom, there's a little slider. You slide that all the way over to the right, it makes the approach plate totally opaque so that you can read it just like a piece of paper. But if you're like me and you got it and you're flying with a student and you want to make sure that they're not going to fly you into the wrong kind of airspace, you can make it dim a little bit. You can still read the information on the approach plate, but then you can also see the information under the chart underneath to make sure, especially for in VFR days, that they're not going to fly into the wrong kind of airspace. So so you have to have the $200 version to make this work, and even on the approach plate itself for Fargo, the little airplane will appear on the screen. We'll talk about that when we go through the stuff on the bottom here. Okay, so in the flight plan, you can add the approach, but now how do you get there? So it said you wanted to go from Crystal to Fargo, and it gives, so then if you choose routes, there are 7 different routes that have been given to airplanes in the past, and ATC has actually filed these and given them out. So you could just do like we did before and choose direct, or pick one where you're going just through Alexandria, basically direct Alexandria, direct to Fargo. Or you can go to Gopher, then Victor 2 to Fargo, which is almost exactly the same thing. But be careful when you're looking at here, this one to Alexandria was given to a turboprop, so this one was for 16,000 to flight level 260. Probably not something you want to do. Probably be more in line to do the Gopher Victor 2 to Fargo. And when you select the route, it puts all that information up in the flight plan up there, so that that's what you're going to file. Crystal, leave from Crystal. The route is going to be Gopher Victor 2 to Fargo, and then land at Fargo. And then on your chart, all the intersections are listed right on there. So if you wanted to do like I have it right here and leave your VFR chart up, all the IFR intersections are listed on the chart. Or you could, but the same thing will happen. You change it to the IFR low chart, it just overrides the information for the Victor 2 route, but all the information is right on there. So right here, the Victor 2 MEA is 3,400 feet past that, just before you get to Alexandria, and you write the same thing on the line itself, and all the intersections are there for you to use. So you can select the route, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and pull up the en route chart, figure out which way you want to do, and then just like you would for in the flight plan portion, where back in the days when you had to write it out and call it to the guy on the phone, the place you're going to get on the highway you're going to fly, and the place you're getting off the highway. So if you change your mind and said you wanted to go to Alexandria and then Victor 171, you know, Victor 2 to Alexandria, then Victor 171 up to Aru, and then over to Fargo, you just type all that stuff in there, and it'll become part of your flight plan. And again, when you hit the send to button and file all this stuff, the information is filed right into the 1-800 weather brief. And again, especially for the IFR guys, you'll get an email saying whether this one's been accepted or not. Most of the time, if you choose one of the routes that's already listed in this list under the routes section of the flight plan form, you'll probably get it. The other thing I found before this route stuff appeared in ForeFlight, if you're going to some place like, you know, in near a large airport like Minneapolis, if there's an arrival route to the airport that you're going to and you want to fly there direct, it'd probably be better if you told them you wanted to go directly to a point on the arrival route and then tell them what airport you want to land at. They'll most likely give you the direct for that type of situation than if you just went right directly to Crystal Airport, right just north of Minneapolis like that. Yeah, you know, because I'd always file direct, and I'd always get this convoluted route that I have to write down because they weren't sending emails back then either. I was one of the first guys to start using ForeFlight just after it came out, and so one day while I was on a trip from like New Mexico to someplace in Mississippi, and so I was over Texas and nobody was talking on the frequency, so I asked the AT. I said, "You got a minute for a question?" And I asked him about this, and he says, "Yeah, if you want to go to the airport, it's better to pick a point on an arrival route. We can, because that way, if you radios quit, we know where you're going, and then you'll be able to choose. You know, we'll be able to figure out what by the airport you're going to go to, what route you're going to fly to get there." Okay, so that's all the stuff on the flight plan portion. So let's go down here to the bottom. Now, so let's go back over to the left side. So left side, first little thing looks like a crayon is exactly that. If your mind doesn't stay on very long. If the crayon is showing, and up here at the top says 4 pixels, that's how wide the thing is. If you draw on the chart, the line appears. And you'll stay there until you clear it off. You can either clear everything that you wrote, or if you drew one line, then another line. There we go. And you just want to get rid of the lines one at a time, then you just do the redo button, or the undo button, or the redo button. And then when you're all done with this, tab done and it goes away. This is really good. You know, there's scratch pads and stuff that we're going to see on the bottom, but if you get a, you know, if you're flying along in the route like this and you get a heading change, you can write it down real quick and be able to, you know, then remember it for later. The next thing is a record button. That usually comes on when the when the ForeFlight feels that it's moving more than 30 knots. And it'll record your entire flight, both altitude and track, and so that you can look at it afterwards. All that information is under track logs in the back. Under the more button at the bottom, track logs about 2/3 of the way down, or 1/3 of the way down. All the flights that you have recorded are over here on the side. I have quite a few because I do a lot of training. It'll give you along the bottom here, it'll give you your altitudes in the blue line and your speed on the other one. This must have been this one must have figured that I was in the car. So then you can download this information in a file form that Google Maps will understand, and it'll take all this information and display it to you on Google Maps so that you can go back and take a look at how the flight worked, looking at the terrain and stuff underneath you. So that's what the record button does. Over here on the side. The plus and minus are getting bigger and smaller. And the route, tapping the little one with the circles on it, if you're zoomed in, but now you want to look at the whole route, you tap that and it gives you your whole route on ForeFlight at the same time. Okay, so that's the flight plan button across the top. Settings. The one that I use most often here is breadcrumbs. When you're flying, the little green, so if you don't want to record it, but you still want to figure out where you went, you can select the breadcrumbs and a little green line will appear on everywhere you flew. And like I said, you can use that if you're doing turns around the point or S turns across the road, and the come on, Fred, tap the right one. Area map here to figure out how close you were to flying a perfect circle or a perfect S across the road. You can do north up all the time. I usually use that now. I used to use track up because that's what I liked before. But when you're out there doing steep turns and S turns and the whole map is spinning around in your lap like that, sometimes it's easier to just leave the north up and let the little airplane do the spinning. The distance rings and all that stuff will appear when you're flying. Glide advisor is the same thing. The track vector is where the airplane is flying, but the way the airplane appears on the screen is the ground track that you're flying at that point. So it doesn't give you heading information, it gives you ground track information. Next one is that synthetic vision they were talking about. You have to have the $200 version to start with. Basically gives you, if all else fails, you can use this for your ground speed and your GPS altitude and get a general idea of what track you're flying. The attitude stuff will only be as good as the information you're getting from whatever system you're hooked up to. If you're hooked up to a Stratus system, usually the ones that come out of a transponder will always be flat. That information will be better. If you have a separate Stratus system, you can buy a separate box that you can carry with you to give you the same information, ADS-B in. But in that one, you got to let it know before you leave the ground what level is, just in case you're just throwing it up on the dashboard and it's kind of laying over its side so that it knows where level is, so it'll give you the correct depiction. It's only supposed, it's just information only. It is not to be used for specific instrument flying, although I suppose in a pinch, if everything else quit, you could use this in an emergency. And then the last thing is all the list of all the favorite places you've already been. If you're going to go to the same place all the time. That's the route section. Yeah, okay, let's get rid of this thing. Down here in the bottom, airport, it brings up the whole airport page. If you pull up an airport and you're going to look into that one again, tap the star in the upper corner of the airport information and it will appear on your favorites list. I have all these airports in the local area that I look at all the time. So they're all on my favorites list. So then it just takes a tap to move to the different airport. If it's something that, but if it's something you looked at, it's not in your favorites list, but you looked at it just recently, then all the airports you looked at recently will be in the recents list. From the places I've tapped on the map, from the flights that I've used, and you can always just browse by going by state, but then then you got to know what airport you're looking for because they're all in alphabetical order. or up here in the search button, just type in the 4-letter identifier of the airport. It'll give you all the ones that are close to that, and tap in and get the information for that particular airport. So since you're in Crystal, I'll go back to Crystal. The top of the airport information box is one quick glance for all the information you need. Both the weather information on the bottom and the weather information at the top, again, is color coded, just like all the dots on the screen. It'll give you basic weather information up there. The name of the airport, sorry, stop at the top. Name of the airport, where the city is at, latitude, longitude, sunrise and sunset. So that's kind of cool. The weather information, airport elevation, pattern altitude, and for the various types of airplanes, what kind of fuel they have there, what kind of approaches they have. The most important frequencies listed right there. If you, like I said, if you have the extra money version, you can do the 3D view, and look, we even get the traffic on there. And it'll tell you what altitude you're at and approximately where you're looking at the airport from, so they can move this around. So you can figure out where I'm going to be coming from, and get a general idea of what the airport's going to look like in the daytime. And as you can see, Crystal's really hard to see at night because it's right in the middle of all these houses. Any FBOs that are at the airport. Taxiways is basically the airport diagram. You see the little blue line here? The blue line around my chart means that I've got the $200, at least the $200 version. And when I'm taxiing at Crystal, my little airplane is going to appear on these taxiways as I taxi around. The nice thing about this is it's got the crayon here, just like it did like we did on the map. So if they say they want you to, if you're a Thunderbird, and taxi Alpha Golf to 14, cross 6 right, 6 left, you can just draw the taxi route right on the plate. And then when you're done, clear it off. Any comments people have left, you can, I think you basically send these, there's remarks about the airport, which is basically stuff out of the airport facilities directory, comments about other people that have gone to the airport. Then you can add a comment. I think it does get filtered. It'll go through ForeFlight before it gets put on the screen here. So it, tries to eliminate all the trolls out there. And down the bottom, the info thing is basically phone numbers and frequencies, again, but a little bit more information about those frequencies. And they still call it AFD, but it's basically the chart supplement page, right out of, so you don't need to buy the chart supplement book anymore. Like I said, it'll give you the information from the chart supplement book right here in the airport section of ForeFlight. But it, again, if you're not knowing what some of these abbreviations are, or what some of these symbols mean on the chart, you have to have the chart supplement book downloaded in your document section to be able to look the stuff up in the legend on the front, like this stuff here in the middle. Takeoff runway available, takeoff distance available, accelerate stop distance available, landing distance available, all those kind of, all that information that they've been adding to the airport, the chart supplement book over the years. Nearby airports, just in case, operating hours, all that kind of stuff. Car rentals, restaurants nearby, all this stuff down here is basically people who have, kind of like ForeFlight has gone and looked at the information about areas nearby to figure out where all that stuff is. The weather information, you can pull up the METARs, which will be decoded for you right underneath. It will be color coded in the green, blue, red and pink version. The terminal aerodrome forecast of the nearby. MOS, let me look it up again. Model output statistics. What is that? I looked it up and read the whole article on it, and in my pilot mind, I'm going, I think it's a grid forecast. What that means is all the information that's sent from all the METARs, all the AWOS, ASOS systems in all the country are sent to the big Cray computer down in Kansas City, and it chunks out a forecast for all sorts of grid points around the country. And the MOS is a forecast for that grid point. So if you're someplace that doesn't have a terminal air drone forecast nearby, the MOS may be your next best thing. It's not something that's official, but like the information says for alternates and that type of thing for your instrument guys that use, it says use forecasts, weather reports, basically all weather information available. So you can look at this and get a general idea what the weather is going to be like over the next day or two. It goes out quite far. So unlike the TAF, which may only go 24 or 36 hours, this one goes all the way to Tuesday. Could only be used as a supplemental product because the NWS stuff is the official stuff. But, for you instrument guys, if the TAF says you don't need an alternate, but the MOS says you do, sorry, then you probably should declare an alternate. This is also a next cool thing. So now you don't need the weather channel information anymore because now ForeFlight has the daily information, again, for about the same time frame as the MOS. And when you tap on that, it'll give you what the weather is going to be like all day long. So it's going to start out VFR, go to your marginal VFR and end up IFR, and then go to low IFR. You got all the colors of the rainbow right here in one spot. But it'll even give you the wind information, the visibility, where the ceiling is going to be, cloud coverage a little bit at the top there, and the percent of how much, at the very bottom, the temperature, and the percent of how much whether it's going to be precipitating or not. Monday doesn't look good on the 21st. The winds aloft, same thing, it's a forecast, so you can go through and pull up all the information so that you can get to the exact time frame that you're doing it. I think this one only goes through the next day. When you look at this, and then if you look at this and then go to the National Weather Service winds and temperatures aloft forecast and compare the numbers, they're going to be close, but they're not going to be exact. So what I think ForeFlight does is takes all that information from the National Weather Service, puts it into their big, huge, puts it in their computer, and they have an algorithm that will chunk this stuff out. So it says, okay, you're coming from Crystal, so we're going to use a lot of the Minneapolis winds and temperatures aloft, a little bit of La Crosse, maybe a little bit of Alexandria, not so much of Grand Forks, but it'll take all the information in the area around us and then combine all that stuff together to come up with a better idea of what the winds are going to be like over the top of the place that you're asking for. And it's all color coded and nice so that you can tell when you're going to be, when it turns red, you're below the freezing level. And the yellow means that you're really far away from the standard atmosphere, so the weather might be, and it'll even warn you sometimes, temperature change or wind change, large wind change, expect turbulence. So it gives you lots of information here. And again, it's as good a guess as the National Weather Service, and you trying to interpolate altitudes and that type of thing. Runway information on this one, it not only gives you, it doesn't give you the picture, but what it does, it gives you the runways. And if there's a METAR there and it has the weather information, it'll tell you which runway is probably the best wind to take off from, and it'll give you the headwind and the crosswind for that runway. Plus all the information that you normally get out of the airport facilities directory, the dimensions of the runway, what it's made out of, what kind of glide slope indicator it's got, if there's any slope to the runway, is there a displaced threshold, the headings of the runway and that type of thing. All that information is available right here in the runway section. Procedures is all the information about the all the different procedures. So we have the airport diagrams, a ForeFlight diagram, an airport diagram, and the hotspot diagram, which is the backside of the page telling you what all the hotspots mean on the airport diagram itself. On the FAA side, all these little round circles around the airport. Departure, if there's departure procedures from that airport, they will be listed here. But since almost every airport in the world has, if you're your instrument guys, if it says takeoff minimums, that means that the approach plates at this airport have the triangle T on the approach plate. So you tap that, and now it's really nice to you. It's kind of went sideways, but you can see at the right side of the page there in the bottom of the page, it says Crystal Airport. It used to take you to the very first page of the takeoff minimums, then you'd have to scroll through to find your airport. Just in the last update I did from ForeFlight, they finally got smart enough to be able to put this so that when you tap on the takeoff minimums, it goes right to your airport. So, so if there's any non-standard takeoff minimums, if you have to worry about stuff like that, if there's any departure procedures that you might want to apply to your flight if you're taking off into the clouds. And almost every airport has a triangle T next to it now, because the last thing that's listed is all the obstacles that are near the airport. So there's a triangle T at almost every airport in the country now. Arrival routes, if you're an IFR person and you're going to be coming in and they tell you to go to a particular arrival route, you can choose one of those and get the information for it. And any approaches that may be there. I have these are the only two that are coming in to Crystal right now, or RNAV to 1.4 and RNAV to 3.2. And if you have the $200 version, you can tap the map and it'll send that approach plate to the map. And again, your little airplane will fly right over the top of it. So you can be looking at so if you want to look at the map and fly the approach at the same time, all the information you need at the approach is at the right spot. But since you looked at, the other thing you can do is just tap RNAV runway 14, and then this will appear in the plate section. So if you're looking at the map and you want to look at the bigger plate, just tap plates at the bottom and it'll appear there. And again, if you spent enough money, the blue square will appear and your airplane will appear inside this blue square when it shows up in that area. So you can tell if you're getting vectors where they're going to blast you through final or anything like that. Then the last thing is NOTAMs. Any airport NOTAMs, any obstacle NOTAMs in the area, any TFR or ARTCC NOTAMs in road traffic control, the FTC NOTAM section at the bottom there. Usually if there's a NOTAM for the airport, if you pull up the airport diagram, the airport NOTAM will appear for you. I think this is going to be there for a while until they finally get this information in the airport, in the chart supplement book. Taxian aircraft echo between Gulf 5 and Gulf 6 is closed if you're less than, if your wingspan is more than 50 feet. But if they start plowing and that type of stuff, that information will appear here too. Map section we've been looking at, plates. You can do, if you're more organized than I am, you can go to the plates and organize. You can put files on here for places that you normally fly to. Some of my students will put all the approach plates that they fly in here. But for me, in my eyes, this stuff is so small, it's hard to read. So basically all I do in here is put the two airports that I fly out of so they can pull up the airport diagram in a hurry. Because the easiest thing for me to do to pick up the plate is have the airports nearby in my favorites, click the airport, go to procedures, pick approaches, pick the one I want, and send it to the map on my done. It's just, to me, that's a whole lot quicker than trying to read the thing in the small print on in the plate section itself. But there's ways of organizing stuff in here with files and different things like that. So if you're more organized than I am, feel free to use this plate section to organize all the plates that you normally use. Documents we already talked about. Imagery is just basically if you're hooked up to Wi-Fi, you'll be able to pick up all the weather charts that you're used to from way back last century. So instead of having it appear on the chart itself, on the map page, you can pull them up in individual charts and look at them through here. So it's got the radar stuff and all the graphic information and icing and freezing levels and turbulence, all that stuff over here on the side. That's under imagery. Flights is the place we went to before, plus all the flights that you filed in the past or flown in the past will be listed over here. So again, if you don't create it as a favorite, but you've flown it before, it will be over here. You just tap it, change the times, and everything will be ready to go. Scratch pads along the bottom. You either have a blank screen that it's already set up. As soon as you pull it up, you can start writing on it. But if I close this one, they have various templates already put together, like one for ATIS information. KMIC, information alpha at 1535 Zulu. The wind is 100 at 15, gusting 25. It's overcast at 3000, and temperature is 403. Dew point is, I wish, 42. Altimeter is 2992. Expect runway 14, and any remarks for noting this stuff. So that, it's a nice place. You can just use your finger and write all this stuff out. Same thing for all you instrument guys. There's the CRAFT scratch pad, so that you're all ready to fill in right on your the information that you need for the IFR flight you're about to take. Or you can create your own with all sorts of different types. You got ATIS ones, PIREP ones, takeoff and landing information, holding information, grid stuff, all sorts of different types of scratch pads that you can use. These checklists here are the generic checklist, and not generic, the exact checklist that comes out of the POH for the airplane. It'll look in, if you're at the highness level, it'll look in the information and it'll pull up the checklist for that aircraft. You can choose which type of checklist you were wanting to do at that one particular moment. And then when you've done the thing, just tap the or hit the check word on the bottom. And I think I got mine turned down, but it, on your iPad, you got Siri.
Master switch on. Fuel quantity indicators. Check quantity. Avionics master switch on.
So Siri will read the checklist to you. And so if you have headsets that have Bluetooth, and you can connect your iPad to the Bluetooth on your headset, anything that Siri says on the iPad will go right to your headset. So you can even use this while you're flying. And the more button, we already talked about loading the aircraft. Another section it has is weight and balance. I'll be doing a talk later in the year on weight and balance, and I'll explain a little bit more then how to set the stuff up. Again, I think if you're at the $200 level, it'll figure out what airplane you have and put this information in there on your own. If not, you just basically click setup and start filling in the stuff from the top to the bottom right out of the airplane, the POH. Now you don't have to put in the model number. It does that because I got it from the memorized stuff that ForeFlight has. But if it's not in there, you can put in all the information about where the arm of all the areas in the airplane, the basic empty. Even if you pull the information offline, you still have to put in the basic empty weight of the airplane for what it is for your airplane at that moment. And then if you put in the CG or the moment, it'll do the math and figure out the other one. Then if there's any takeoff or landing limits or ramp or land or zero fuel limits that you could put in there, then to create the grid, you can put in all the information for each segment of the grid, and then it'll draw it on the line there for you. Then when you load the airplane, it's green if you're within weight and balance. But if you do something and get yourself out of weight and balance, everything turns red and says, nope, this is not going to work. So I put in way too much stuff in the baggage area to demonstrate that. So again, I'll be doing a weight and balance seminar in a few months. So keep your eyes open for that. We'll spend time talking about all these terms and what they mean. And I'll spend a little bit more time here in the weight and balance section of ForeFlight to show you how to do that work. Because basically this is almost the same as just about any weight and balance program that I've seen. Track logs we talked about. The passenger stuff is how to hook up there. The account information is your personal information that you've given ForeFlight, and it also tells you what level you're at and whether you want to upgrade it, and when it's due. And if you have a Jeppesen account, you can tap the Jeppesen thing over here in the more section and put in the information from Jeppesen. And instead of when you pull up plates, instead of the NOAA plates, you'll have the Jeppesen plates available to you. And support and about, that's the same thing that's in all computer programs. And then at the bottom here, you have a countdown timer or a count up timer. And if it's a count up timer, all I gotta do is tap it and it'll start timing for you. I don't know, since the iPad has a stopwatch on it with a lapse thing on it, when I'm doing cross countries and having actually to do it like olden days where I actually have to time the legs to see what my ground speed is, I'll probably use the stopwatch on ForeFlight instead of this thing because there's no lap here. When you fly past your spot, you got to tap it to stop, read what it says, write it down, and then hit it again, and hit it again to get it to start counting for the next leg. And if it's a countdown timer, then you got to put in the number that you want it to count down from, and then tap it and it'll start counting down. So sometimes it's, I probably haven't used that one a whole lot. So I know this is very fast. I know this is lots and lots of stuff. That's why I said in the very beginning here, in documents, go to the ForeFlight section and download the ForeFlight mobile, the pilot's guide to ForeFlight mobile. Because if you find something that I've been talking about that I went through real quickly because I had to, and I want to take a look at a more detailed description. The nice thing about all this ForeFlight stuff is if they update the program, the pilot guides are updated automatically. All the stuff that you can do with weight and balance and how to set the information up in weight and balance. There's another book for that. There's a one for, but if you don't have it, you can if you're hooked up to Wi-Fi, you can download it real fast, and then it'll appear in your documents. So. Now we were as high as 40, we're down to 32. We didn't do too bad, kept most of you guys along the way here. Anyway, any questions, comments, or concerns? You can unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay, we got some chat stuff going in here. Let's see what we got. Need time to play with this thing. That's exactly right. When ForeFlight first came out, I was one of those people that goes, electronic stuff. I'll just keep using my charts and everything, and I'll just, I don't need all this electronic stuff. But then I'm with a student. We're flying to Ames, Iowa, and it's dark. And we need to land at Ames, Iowa to do something. I can't remember what it is. And so we get down there and we look at the chart and look at the CTAF on the sectional chart and put that number in the radio and click the mic 7 times and nothing happens. And I'm going, what the heck? So we tried it again, nothing happened. She had ForeFlight in her lap. And I said, does that thing have the airport facilities directory on it? She said, yeah. She tapped the screen a couple times, brought up the AFD, said, okay, you keep flying us, keep us out of the trees. And I grabbed the thing and looked at it. Ames, Iowa used to have the pilot controlled lighting on the clearance delivery frequency. So I had to go to the clearance delivery frequency, and I'm hearing cleared to Des Moines as filed. And I clicked the mic 7 times real quick to get the lights up so we could land there. So that situation alone, instead of having to buy all those green books for the whole country, all the green books are in here, all the sectionals are in here, all the low and high and route charts are in here. If you're a Jeppesen person, all your Jeppesen subscription can be added to the ForeFlight information. So it's an excellent system to have for situational awareness and for safety, and adding all those, using the radar information and all that kind of stuff to help you along the way. It is really an excellent system to have. So that's all I have for now. So if you just want to, if you want to hang on a little bit and ask me about something, that's fine. If not, I'll stay here for a little bit. And but otherwise, if you're cleared to leave, I will. For those of you who are looking for Wings credit, I will have that information sent to me by my computer guru, who will take all the information we got from our Zoom meeting here, and I'll put that information into the FAA.gov site probably Monday or Tuesday.